now.
Right. And Matt, can I make a request too before we get going? Well, the screen is big enough. I was just going to, the text is bigger. I was going to say, do we need that information on the right side of the screen that shows the actual, who actually did what and the formatting changes?
I will figure out if I can take that out.
Okay, all right.
I got another text from Rudy, says, can I do a call in? I'm gonna tell him yes. Where can I direct him to
Oh,
do the
give
call in?
me 1 sec. There should be, I think, a phone number in his email.
Yeah,
I'm
there
looking.
is. There's a one tap mobile, and then there's just a regular one. The one tap mobile. That's too long.
Shall I tell him just to go back to his email?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. You know, what I will do too is I am going to let me get my phone. I'll take a screenshot. I'll take a picture of it and send it to him too.
Okay.
Oh, I see he's been trying to text me as well.
Shall I tell him you're sending him a screenshot?
Yes.
Okay.
But we can go on.
Okay.
And maybe take roll call so we'll know who is here.
Okay.
Where did Reginald disappeared now?
Yeah, I think he just stepped away from his chair. So
And
I'm
where did
When-
Jesse go? Jesse's not on the screen either.
Yeah, I don't see him either.
Huh?
I don't see him either.
Yeah, you're right. We lost some folks.
Yeah.
Dropping like flies.
Hi, Creighton.
Hey, Creighton.
Hey, Jose. Hey, everyone.
How you doing, Craig?
Good
Hi.
morning,
Hey,
Paula.
Mariano. How you doing?
Good.
Hey there. Good morning.
And my apologies. I may have to leave early as well, but I will try my best not to. I just have to.
Okay.
Well, I don't know what happened to Jesse.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
he's no longer on the participants list.
Rudy's
Uh,
asking me, does the Zoom phone number work? I'm just gonna tell him yes. Okay.
Reggie Lyles is still showing on the participants list, but not. Jesse says his wireless went out. He's trying to get back in.
Oh, okay. What happened to, oh, you said Jesse said that?
Reggie's still showing
Reg-
on the participant list, but he's not showing on the screen.
He may have had a comfort break.
Yeah, it looks like he just stepped away from the screen, so he's still.
Oh,
Oh,
there,
you see a
Jesse.
screen picture? I don't see it. Okay, I don't see a square for
entered.
him.
Sorry about that. My wireless went out.
No worries.
You gotta pay your bill,
Oh,
Jesse.
there's Reggie. Yeah. Okay.
Here we go.
Okay.
All right, so I think we got Brenda, Jesse, and Rudy, I think, is still trying to call in. And then we got I'm seeing Mike and Creighton and Paula. And Reggie, I guess, is still
Why don't we get started and I will
Yeah,
try
there's
to
Reggie.
troubleshoot with
I
Rudy.
apologize.
Okay.
Bad news from the family.
Oh, no. No.
I don't want to belabor this. It's just always something. Let's just plow ahead.
Okay,
Yes.
Sickness.
I'm sorry to hear that, Reggie.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry.
So let's go ahead and plow ahead. So do we want to start with section 2 specific responsibilities or back up and have any comments on section 1? Are we good with pretty much with section 1? So we can go on to 2 or do you want to back up?
I can suggest that Jesse just summarize what changes he made in 1. Perhaps that would be, because not everybody was on the phone.
Mhm.
Right. So I took some of the comments that we discussed. I did think that a lot of what we were talking about was actually about staffing and sort of the realistic, setting realistic expectations, but also balancing sort of making a policy that would inspire and really make the department change or make changes to the way that they do their daily operations. This first section, what I've done is included language about being both proactive and preventative problem solving as opposed to just responding to crime. I reprioritized or just reordered the list of items which were included to what I thought might be relevant to community concerns about the ordering and the priorities of these particular objectives of CROs. I did have a question as to number 5, which I didn't quite understand. I did this second clause. There is the attending all, or it says attending all neighborhood council regular meetings and providing routine updates, as well as a fully briefed alternative with necessary. And I thought that might have meant if the main or assigned community resource officer was unavailable, that a replacement officer or CRO sergeant would be able to provide that report and be fully briefed on all the issues that were to be addressed at that particular meeting. Does that sound like the right intent?
Yeah, that was exactly it. That when in fact the CRO for whatever reason can't make it, that another officer, could be another CRO or even a patrol officer, would be sent in his or her place, but also that person, that officer, would be fully briefed as to the issue, so they can give a full accounting of what's going on.
If I can, I would probably break that into 2 sentences. We can wordsmith it later, though. So it's attending our neighborhood regular meetings and providing routine updates, period. And then if the CRO is not available, then maybe ensure that a fully briefed alternate officer attends. Something along those lines, but we can wordsmith it later on.
That looks good.
Okay. There was this part about that Mariano added, coordinating enforcement efforts with city law enforcement personnel and informing, answering, and alleviating neighborhood concerns. Mariano, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I just last time we met, we talked about, just the use of enforcement, and that I guess we all decided that, that was going to be a necessary thing, but as not only coordinating with the city and law enforcement personnel, but also informing and answering and alleviating any concerns from the affected neighborhoods. So I just thought that would be important, so that folks, because the whole intent of this policy is to build, trust and also transparency. So, if there's something going on in a neighborhood, we need to make sure, or the CROs need to make sure that that entire neighborhood is informed of those efforts. Thank you.
Do you, Reggie?
Yeah, Mariano, with the phrase employing de-escalation techniques in that sentence somewhere, create a more better environment for trust. If we state that right in the policy.
Yeah, I think we already somewhere, I don't remember, de-escalation efforts. But I just wanted, so instead of just, having, to deploy some kind of effort out there, that there just be some information given to the neighborhoods, what's happening, instead of them being in the dark. But yeah, we can include that word. I like de-escalation as often as we can use it.
And then the informing, that would come after the event, right? We're not talking about, because see, I can see reading this from a police officer's way they think. They would think, well, wait a minute, we have a lot of plans and operations that we keep confidential because we're trying to stop crime, so we can't talk about things that we're planning or even working on with the community. And they would actually kind of they would infer that the community wants to be in on the planning of operations prior to the event. An event's going down, a situation's going down, we're responding to a drug dealing hotspot, a prostitution strip or whatever, and we have to tell them what our techniques are going to be to responding to that.
It's not so much being part of the planning. I'm just going to give you an example. Here in my neighborhood, in my street, I often see unmarked vehicles. They end up being sheriffs. They end up being either some Homeland Security ICE folks. I know nothing about it. I would just like to have some information, about, look, this is happening in your neighborhood. It doesn't have to be very specific. We're attempting this, we're attempting that. I just would like to be, as a resident of my neighborhood, be informed. And if I hear from a community resource officer, better, that would just give me more, instill in me, more reason for me to be more involved with my NCPCs, my neighborhood resource officers, any relations with OPD. But if it continues the way it is, basically I don't count, and that's what neighbors feel when they see these enforcement efforts. That's my point.
Yeah, you have a great point, but I can see the snafus coming in it. They're gonna say, they're gonna hide behind government code under the Freedom of Information Act that says we do not have to disclose any information on ongoing investigations. That's what that's gonna be the response to this. Because their argument is that if we tell you about it, it may get out, it leaks out, it puts our officers at risk, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's going to be the response. In the government code, I think it's 2535 of the Freedom of Information Act that prohibits having to divulge any information on ongoing investigation or undercover agents or stuff like that. So,
excuse me, for the record, I think that Rudy's now on the phone, right?
Yeah, I'm here. Yep, I'm here.
Okay, good.
Oh, great. Thanks, Rudy. I just wanted to comment on this point, and yes, I do believe that there are times when police will say, we can't divulge that information because of an ongoing investigation. when in fact they simply don't want to give out any information. So
I know it does it all the time.
I know that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think what Jesse just put on, to the extent possible, is the best we could do, because unless you want to push it in some sort of a way, why can't you provide information, et cetera? I don't know that there's any way we can really get that kind of information. As there's an ongoing police action or planning or anything like that. However, after the fact, I think we fully can and should
Yes.
be informed as to what happened. If in my neighborhood, as it's happened, there's a bunch of police cars on a corner, and I turn around and they're gone. Well, what happened? If it's not part of an ongoing investigation or ongoing police action, as a resident, I have a right to know. So who's
That's
the
right.
best person to ask? Well, the CRO. Well, I had 5 police cars down there at Birdsall and Camden. What the hell happened? And I think those are the kind of questions that should be answered by OPD. And I think that's what Mariano's point was in terms of this part of the section.
And
one.
that was my question. We would talk about after the act.
Yeah.
And if we are, we could say per the Freedom of Information Act or something like that.
Yeah.
Can I? Yeah, let's see. I want to try to follow the hands of
sorry.
Creighton, and then I have a comment if Creighton doesn't
Mike's
say
also
mine.
up.
Thanks, Brenda.
Yes, sure. Thanks so much, Commissioner Harbin Forte. So I just added a comment in the chat. So, we're focusing on enforcement efforts only within the lens of city enforcement and city agency enforcement and law enforcement. But we have macro coming to Oakland. So we would also want to consider perhaps having OPD and CROs coordinate with macro and OFD when appropriate. So just kind of expanding the scope to include coordination with those other agencies. So in the comment, I just added enforcement efforts or responses to safety issues with city and law enforcement personnel or other public safety departments or agencies. Just trying to capture macro.
Got it.
That's good.
And then
Brenda.
thank you. And I was going to just say, instead of all the language about informing, answering, or leaving, why don't we just say and debriefing the affected neighborhoods about the specific enforcement efforts to the extent possible. And the debriefing, if they're going to debrief us at the meeting, then certainly we can answer questions and everything. So it is, and so debriefing is typically post-incident, so there's nobody is concerned about trying to disclose information before the event.
So just
Would that work if we just say debriefing?
So
I
just
think
a
it helps.
question about that,
Well-
because there could be 2 different ways that you could view this particular paragraph. One is the on the street interaction with a neighbor who wants to go up to a CRO. Do we want to encourage that, or do we want to put off that conversation and go to have these information disseminated specifically at neighborhood council meetings?
I would say the former. Any resident that sees, I see a bunch of cop cars down at my corner. I should be able to go up to a CRO or actually any police officer, I would think, and just say, hey, what happened here? And again, if it's an ongoing police action and they say, well, we can't tell you right now, I say, fine. But if in fact it's already an issue that's been to some degree resolved, and they can provide me with that information, I shouldn't have to wait until the next neighborhood council meeting for the CRO to report on it. Should be able to, and I think that should be encouraged. I think people should know they can go up to any police officer and ask what happened, what just happened here.
And then it might be an issue in certain communities with that word debriefing. So because it kind of aligns itself with snitching. So maybe like just change that wording a little bit for other communities so they're not going to be taken aback by it, because mentally it might be just like too much. Well, I'm not a snitch, so they won't want to help. or cooperate. But if it's like, hey, we're gonna ask you a few questions, something a little more subtle than that term, because it just, that's, yeah.
That's
Well,
right,
Rudy-
that's good.
Rudy, would you think that, I'm sorry, Reggie has his hand up.
No,
Mike's got his head up.
I was actually taking my hand down. I'm sorry.
Okay. So Rudy, do you think that, the prior language, would work? Informing, answering, and alleviating, as opposed to debriefing?
Yeah, I
Just-
think that'd be a little more, debris, because I mean, that's, when you're facing a major case, they throw that word out to you all the time: debrief, cooperate, all that stuff. So, and the whole movement here is for community empowerment. So, nobody's going to feel comfortable thinking that they're telling on somebody in their community. So, but if it's like, hey, we have some issues here that we need to get resolved for public safety reasons, we need you to answer these questions. So, something like that, where it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Public safety makes sense.
So you good with that, Brenda? Just stay with the informing. and alleviating?
Sure, I'm certainly sensitive to the concerns that debriefing may have some connotations that we don't intend. But let me ask you, in what context are we talking about this? So we are talking about, there's an enforcement action, there are all the police cars around. What are we trying to accomplish? Are we saying that while this is going on, if a citizen approaches and says, hey, what's going on here, that the community resource officer should sort of stop what they're doing and get a charge of interfering with the police? Should they stop what they're doing and answer questions to the extent that they can? Or are we talking about on Tuesday, there's an enforcement event, lots of police cars and everything. And then at Wednesdays or Thursdays meeting, that the CRO say, yeah, on Tuesday, this was going on. I can't give you more information. At what context and at what point are we saying that the officer should do this, the answering the questions and explaining? At what point? During the incident, after the incident, or when?
Well, go ahead, Mariano.
So,
And then Mike.
yeah, I would say, so this is all part of informing. So if there's going to be some kind of effort, I don't really see a problem, how a CRO can go to that affected neighborhood and just simply, either by flyers or some way of communication, is just let them know there's going to be this effort taking place. I can't give you more information than this, but just be careful, or this is information for you to know. That is part of their responsibility, as I see this policy. And they can state, we can't give you more information, but that way, no one's left in the dark. So whether it happens before or after, I think it's really important for them to know beforehand. Afterwards, it's, well, thank you so much, but I couldn't get to my home. I saw police officers, walking around with drawn guns. So it's just to alleviate any kind of concern and also build that trust. So, I didn't mean to, infer that, give specifics on what's going on, but just some general information, and that also leads to, let me see. Yeah, coordinated enforcement efforts. Does that mean that the CROs are part of the whatever undercover, or are they just simply, working with that neighborhood? I'm still concerned with that coordinating enforcement efforts language. Thank you.
All right, Mike, and then Jesse, and then Creighton and Paula.
Thank you, Judge. Just as an old DA and as an old public defender, I think you may be expanding the scope of discovery. I mean, one of the first questions that any good defense lawyer asks when a witness takes the stand is, have you discussed your testimony with anyone? Or I would expand that and say, have you discussed this operation or this procedure with anyone? And And if he's briefed you, Mariano, then I'm going to want to interview you to see what he said. And I want to see if you took notes and stuff. So I don't know, the DA may have some concern about the briefing process. I'm all in favor of it, but I'm just raising a concern that as a lawyer pops up to me.
Okay,
Again,
Jesse? I'm sorry. Jesse was next, Jose, unless you have a response.
No, go ahead, Jesse.
So my thought was, I completely understand the need and the want and the concern about having an idea about some enforcement actions that are going to happen. But even identifying the location where an enforcement action might happen, I think is going to be very difficult to get law enforcement on board, mainly because that may very well tip off the people that they are trying to surprise or to handle a search warrant for, enforce a search warrant, arrest warrant, whatever it may be. If we take
And
the
officer safety.
and officer safety, right? Are they then they have concerns of, and we're going to hear this. Did this just notify the whoever is in the vicinity and expose them to a potential ambush? Right.
Right.
And there's not going to be very much response to that. Just think about the most recent like CRO action that we heard about at the last meeting, which was the execution of a search warrant and arrest warrant for the like underground or illegal gaming establishments. Just having some idea of what block or what area it might be might tip off residents who are involved and then get them to just clean out. So I think we're going to get a lot of pushback on the before aspect of it. Now, if a CRO is coordinating the efforts, which is what I think this paragraph gets to, it seems to me that like we saw in this most recent search warrant, that a CRO would likely be there, know what's going on, have written the search warrant, and be one of the officers who's involved in the execution of that search warrant, which may also mean that that CRO will be there and potentially be able to give information, maybe not at the exact moment that they are in the midst of an execution of a search warrant, but maybe after they're done, or if there's a crowd or there's people who have questions about it. I think that this section specifically goes to on scene or the sort of person-to-person interactions. I do think that we can look at these other parts because we do have paragraphs 4 and 5, which talk about what CROs do at the meeting, at neighborhood council meetings. And so perhaps, and if it's a CRO who's involved, it's very likely that it's related to some sort of project or neighborhood council priority.
Right, it's Creighton and then Paula.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to elevate, and uplift what Mariano had said about just like the concern around enforcement actions generally. I think one of the biggest challenges with the CRO positions is, it's seen as kind of, this hybrid within the community where some individuals see them just as regular cops if they're conducting enforcement actions, and then others see them as, more of the neighborhood beat cops. And to really engender the trust and partnership and relationship that, I think all of us are looking for within the CRO position. I think, having that CRO officer conduct enforcement actions really will create a chilling effect for neighborhood participation or neighborhood engagement of that CRO officer. Because let's remember, to that point of snitching, if the CRO is associated with any type of enforcement action, then members of the community will be very much less likely to engage that officer because they'll see that officer as just another member of OPD. So, Mariano, your comment to me is worthy of more in-depth discussion, because I think it really hits at the heart of what the CRO's specific responsibilities are. Is it just to serve neighborhood priorities that are kind of outside the realm of enforcement and more along the lines of just coordinating projects and helping with neighborhood needs, or is it a blend? And if it is that blend, then I think we have to just be aware of the unintended consequences that might come from, an officer that is enforcing, and then the chilling effects that might result from that.
Who's next?
Paulo is next.
Thank you. To the point of what the CROs are supposed to be responsible for, at our NCPC meetings, which happen once every other month, and so something might have happened a month before, and we have a question about it. They never know. They never know. There will have been cop cars, huge fuss, something happening on College Avenue. And when we ask the CRO later, they'll say, gee, I don't know. Was there something there? No, I mean, I really think a part of this needs to be that the CROs need to be notified of what the action was so that they can explain it to the neighborhood council afterward. At least, I mean, I think that shows respect for both the CRO and the neighborhood council. I honestly, I've had no trouble going up to cops and saying what's going on and having them say, I can't tell you, or what is going on. But I don't think our information should depend upon Paula Hawthorne going up to the cop and asking. I really think the CRO should be able to report on actions at the neighborhood council meetings afterward. I quite understand they can't do prior notice, and I really think we shouldn't even talk about them having to do prior notice, because I think that's just not in the DNA of any of this. But I do think they ought to be able to report on it afterward so that people in the neighborhood know what's going on. Thank you. I'll take down my hand.
Reggie's hand is up, Jose.
Yeah, I want to agree with Paula because, they're telling you they don't know, and they may know, and they may not know, but they're going to always say they don't know because they don't have to tell you. Under the Freedom of Information Act, and I'm looking this up right now, it says the section is section 7, subsection E. It exempts all information, wiretaps, plans, and they list the whole thing that is totally exempt from disclosure to anyone, while it's an ongoing investigation, or if they think it may jeopardize someone working undercover in that capacity. So the law is on the law enforcement side, and this has been reinforced over and over and over. So they're not going to tell you. Even if we write it in the policy, they're going to say we got a federal, Freedom of Information Act that exempts that. So I don't think we should even ask for it. I think we should, the optimum word, what Paula said, is afterwards. Somehow we got to make it clear that we want to know everything we want to know after this event is over. But while it's going on or while it's under investigation, we get it. This has already been decided case law.
Anybody else? Brenda?
No other hands up.
Okay. Yeah, I think we can look at this in the three different stages, if you will, before, during, and after either an investigation or an incident, etc. So I think the before, Reggie just covered it, and even if they could tell us, there's no way that we can really ask for that information or push that issue beforehand.
Or during.
Well, I wanted to break it up because it certainly before, even if they could tell us. So I don't think we can push that issue. And I think I don't know that we're going to have a whole lot of pushback around that we can't push that issue before. And during, you have to be, I think you have to have some common sense. If somebody is being handcuffed and you go up and say, hey, what are you doing? and it can be seen as interference, then that should, I think the CRO or the officer has a perfect right to say, hey, back off, and let me finish what I'm doing here. So that's, I think during, people have to understand that to a great degree, you have to let the cops do their job. After is a whole different story. I think residents have a perfect right to ask. What I don't want to see is that an officer says, after something is already concluded, the guy's in the car, for example, he's already handcuffed and everything, and somebody goes up and asks, what happened here? What I don't want to see is an officer think that they can just blow that off. Go back in your house, or go over there. So that's what I don't want to see. So I think probably the language that we have is sufficient. So I'd say we cover all those points, and the qualifier, of course, is as possible. So that, I think, pretty much covers everything. What I wanted to also go on and comment on was Creighton's comment about the chilling effect of having the CRO involved in enforcement, and also Mariano's concern. While I understand, I'm trying to understand those concerns. I also see that if in fact a CRO, especially in the most affected, the most violence prone beats, Deep East, for example, I would expect that if we did have a CRO that was fully engaged, has begun to build the trust of the community, was a participant in the development of a priority, say a drug house, and in fact begins to take that through the SARA process, that at what I would hope to be a successful conclusion of that is the resolution of this problem and all the problems around a drug house, that even though they were involved in enforcement that would be a natural part of closing a drug house, for example, that they would be seen that as a positive in the neighborhood, as opposed to having a chilling effect. Now, it may have a chilling effect among those who are in other drug houses, but I think in general, in that kind of a hypothetical situation, that the community as a whole would see that as a positive, as opposed to a negative. And that, what I'm talking about specifically, is a connection of a CRO with an enforcement action. And I see that as being much more of a potentiality in a beat that has a great deal of serious problems. And that's in fact where I'm hoping to see that the community policing program is strongest, in those beats that have the most serious problems. So Creighton.
Hi, Jose. Yeah, thank you. I think that makes sense. If I could just call back to a conversation that I had a couple weeks ago with a community organization in Deep East Oakland. So kind of pitching to them the importance and the value in getting involved in their neighborhood councils. And they immediately said, you know what, we don't want anything to do with neighborhood councils because police attend. And anybody that's associated with our group and our community, they don't want anything to do with police because of all the traumatic experiences, all the bad blood, and all the negativity that they associate with law enforcement. So you have that kind of contingent in areas of Oakland, and who then may not even want to get involved in the structure of neighborhood councils because they see a CRO as just as any other police officer. So I don't think there's an easy solution to this. I think maybe there's a way to, just as Paula suggested, where if the CRO is just responsible for the reporting afterwards and not seen as directly involved in the enforcement, then that CRO could be seen as more trusted. But I still think then even in that situation, a drug house is really clear, but what about like somebody who is like, you know, popular on the block, but is like selling alcohol out of his, you know, out of his trunk or something like that, you know? If a CRO is then, you know, enforcing on that action, then maybe the CRO loses trust. And obviously, you know, selling alcohol out of your trunk is illegal, but, you know, depending on how the community sees it, it might be a different thing. So it just becomes really, really complicated with the CRO engaging in enforcement actions, I think.
Thank you, Creighton. Mariano.
Yeah, thank you, Creighton. So yeah, because enforcement, I think we're just talking, or this conversation is focusing on hard, violent crime or drugs. You know, something that could cause violence and violent crime. But you know, yeah, like someone selling alcohol out of their trunk, or squatters or yard blight. You know, those kind of that's enforcement. If there could be an enforcement effort to eliminate some squatters, or you know, address some yard blight that's been going on for months and months in a particular neighborhood, that's also enforcement. So I think that when it comes to, you know, crime, violent crime, then I can certainly see where, you know, that kind of information cannot be shared, or you know, I actually wouldn't, as a neighborhood resident, would not want to know that kind of information, you know, any specifics, because of what Mike DeSparrow said. I don't want to be taken to court. But, you know, so I think that, you know, somewhere, you know, maybe not today, but, you know, we just need to distinguish what enforcement, you know, means, and what type of crime, or what type of, you know, against the law things could fall under that category. Thank you.
Thanks, Mariano. Brenda.
Oh, that actually might be the end. I was just going to suggest that it's 10:52, and we are spending a lot of time on this section. We still haven't advanced to section 2 yet. So I was going to suggest that we kind of put a pin in this maybe, and move on to another section, so that we can, and then everybody can mull this over and maybe come back with some proposed language. We see what the tensions are and what the problems will be and could be. But I think there's a way to phrase it.
Thank you, Brenda. I think that's a good suggestion. So there seems to be two, and correct me if I'm wrong, there seem to be two things that we can mull over. And there are two important questions. One is the enforcement, the connection between CROs and enforcement. And I'll put that in quotes because I think we need to have a clear idea of what that's meant, what that means. And the other is, and I'm just going to put it under information, what kind of information, how and why we would ask for information in the context of what we had talked about, you know, before, during, and after an action, investigation, etc. So I think these are two things that we can certainly, as Brenda said, put a pin in it so we can move forward. But they're important questions, so I think they warrant taking some time and thinking about them. So with everybody's permission, why don't we move on then to, is there anything we need, any comments on 9, 10, 11 of this section 1, or this number 1?
I just wanted to highlight, there's a lot of discussion about CROs and the focus of their efforts and what they should be doing and whether or not they should be answering calls for service or assisting with other calls. I think it's based on sort of how OPD uses CROs, the way, and this policy in paragraph number 9, that one of their primary duties is answering calls for service if it's needed. I had a conversation with a CRO sergeant man guy who's in the downtown area, and one of the things that he does every time that he finds himself with free time is ask his commander, hey, can I help with anything? And that commander usually just says, answer calls for service. So they end up being sort of that stopgap, and it's here in this policy, and I want everyone to be very clear about it, that it's part of it. That's all for me.
Yeah, that's really an important question. And frankly, we could probably be here for some time talking about just this point of at what point what parameters are there around the CROs answering calls for service. My personal opinion is that it should be as a last resort. There's plenty for, I would think, a CRO to do within their beat. And even in terms of helping another beat with their work. And I'd say that specifically like in Maxwell Park, we've always said that our level of crime is so much lower than 27X, which is right below us, Melrose High Hopes, that our CRO should spend a certain amount of time with coordinating with the 27X CRO, because in fact there's such more serious problems in 27X than in our 28X beat. So it seems a bit strange to me the CRO would be calling in saying, hey, I don't have anything to do, and having their sergeant or lieutenant or whoever say, well, why don't you answer calls for service? There's plenty for the CROs to do. So I want to keep that. My preference is that we make it clear that CROs being assigned for something other than their actual duties, which I see to be focused on beat issues, beat problems, beat priorities, that be something that stays within certain limits. And we can talk about that later, but I wanted to go back to Jesse. Go ahead, Jesse.
Thanks. So I will say that this is specifically about their assigned beats, whereas the paragraph afterwards, after this list, does make clear that they may answer calls for service outside of their assigned beat and assist with crowd management events, but talks about how, due to the importance of the CRO program and fostering relationships with the community, drawing them from their assigned duties and beats is disfavored and should only be done as a last resort. But I also think that due to the staffing challenges that we have heard from OPD about how there are only 15 officers, we are going to have a lot of CROs who have more than possibly 2 or 3 assigned beats, which means that answering calls for service in a lot of different beats. That's just something to think about, and how we address that issue. Idea, so people have not yet had the chance to talk about it or think about it. I would suggest that we think about it, maybe come back to it at a later date and be able to move on to section 2 here.
Okay. Any other? I don't see any other hands up. Brenda, anybody else?
No, I
Okay.
don't see any others.
Yeah, the whole question of CROs and the reduced numbers of CROs is a whole other, certainly a whole other question that we can spend a considerable amount of time on. But it is something that we definitely need to talk about, because I think, or consider, because to me it's a question of who made the decision to cut down on the number of CROs. How was that decision made? Why was it made? And so those are questions I think that may well be questions that should be directed at the chief. That in fact I think we should at some point invite into one of these meetings, because I think it comes from the top. So I'd like to hear his perspective on that. But putting that aside, if there's no other comments, yes, let's go on to number 2, specific responsibilities. So any additions, deletions, comments on this first paragraph?
And old lady font, please. Please. Can we get how about old people's font?
Yeah, old people, man, I'll tell you.
Yeah, right.
So any comments, or does this all sound good?
I don't see any hands up. I think we're good.
Okay, well, if we're good with this, then let's move on farther down. Comments?
Not seeing any hands up. I'm sorry, Mariano.
Yeah, I just, the SARANet, the database, where is that kept and who has access to that? Or is it public accessible?
I wish. My understanding is that it resides exclusively in OPD, and that no one but OPD has access to it. It's one of the things that I've hammered OPD about, is our having access to that information. And obviously, it should be redacted however it needs to be, but we should have access to that raw data so that we learn from it. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mariam.
Because later on, it says that the review of this, and who does the review if not the CROs? And if so, that's just a kind of fuzzy question.
Paula has her hand up.
This is an issue of access to the SARANet database is an issue that we've talked to OPD about a lot. My own research background was in databases, and in particular, the problems with privacy and so forth. So it isn't just as easy as, oh, well, we'll redact part of it. This just went down a big rabbit hole in trying to get public access to the SARANet. And so personally, I've given up. I think that the best we can do is to have the CROs, who are part of the Oakland Police Department and can access SARANet, obviously, should be giving us updates as to what's happening. But as far as making that database available to the public, that is honestly a difficult technical push. And I'm telling you, we went around and around this. You know, I am a Christian, through God all things are possible, but nevertheless, I think that this is kind of beyond what we can do.
Well,
Wow.
go ahead, Reggie.
Okay. This is the characteristics of Oakland Police Department. This is not law. We have a Freedom of Information Act, which means what? That any citizen can go up and say, at 954 45th Street, there was a shooting. I want to have that police report. And you have to pay for it, but they have to divulge it under the Freedom of Information Act. They move slow to frustrate you, like Paula so aptly described. But this has already been settled. What we actually need is somebody to make a case out of it. Someone to say, well, we're going to sue you, City of Oakland, because you won't divulge this information. You can go up to the Oakland Police Department and ask for all of the accidents that happened on Shattuck and 59th, at the corner of Shattuck and 59th. They have to give you all of that information, the entire police report. Who was in the accident, their address, their phone number, and all of that. That's settled case law. So now to have this Sarah and say, oh, this data we're going to say is out of the Freedom of Information Act. When you can go up and ask for, I'd like to see a homicide case that happened in 2019 at such and such address. They have to give you that. Now, they're just frustrating you. And that's just the attitude of the police department. What are they trying to keep back? I mean, what do they have to hide from you if the database is after the fact? The operation is not going on. It's ended. Then it comes under the Freedom of Information Act, and anybody can have access to it who was willing to pay for it and petitions it. I don't see their argument for saying no, other than we can just say no because we want to, because we can, and we'll just do that until you get tired. We have more money than you, and you don't have the lawyers to come and fight us and force us to do it. So I think the strategy ought to be getting up in the grill of the chief of police, and say, look, this is your responsibility to change this. This is like a John Burris thing, or, why aren't you divulging this information?
Paula,
It's very different, Reggie, having full and complete public access to a whole database than to specific items of information. The SARANET database includes all ongoing projects. It is a database that is about actions that have not yet happened. It's a whole database of lots of different information. That's why Jose talked about part of it being redacted, which was a part of what we talked to people about earlier, was to how to at least redact the parts that are not the parts that say, what actions are going to be happening at what times. It's not specific. It's not like doing a Public Information Act request where you get specific items and you have the right to that. This is having the public have access to a database. And Jose's long time goal has been for us to have access to that database so that the people in the NCs can be finding out what's going on in other NCs, what's going on with other things. There are good reasons to have public access to the database, but it ain't going to happen. And honestly, I don't think this is just OPD being stubborn. I think this is an issue of how you get databases that are completely ironclad so that you don't have people hacking into them, so that you don't have damage being done to the data by malicious forces from the outside. There's a lot going on the internet that says that would not be an especially good idea. And also, OPD does not have the technical expertise to be able to harden that database so that you could have just regular public access to it, including access from people who would like to do damage.
Well, Mariano.
Yeah, so it sounds like this database SARA process is key to the community policing policy. And then later on, down in section 3, I think it talks about use and auditing of the SARA-NET database and by CROs. And so that just tells me that, you use and you audit something to do an evaluation and see how effective, that is, and also the policy in general. And so, the information that we need from that is, how, is this policy effective? How is it not? Are we trying to reduce crime now, or are we trying to prevent it? So those kind of things. So I think that, it's important for us to talk about not, having access to the database, but, just having the ability to get the information to assess, the policy. Is it being effective? That's all I was raising. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariano. I've got a couple thoughts about along these lines. And that is that if in fact we take the position that, okay, OPD, you're off the hook in terms of giving public access to the SARANET database. A substitute for that may well be that that OPD not only require as a part of our policy that the CROs regularly and immediately report to the sponsoring neighborhood council on a priority, which is a SARA project, and it should be in the database, but that they report to the sponsoring neighborhood council at the completion of each of the steps, something I've said in the past. So if they're regularly responding, or I should say reporting, upon the completion of each step in real time, not the next meeting, when they finish the SARA, the scan, the analysis, the response, and the assessment, if those are regularly done in real time, then those are reports that go out, they're public information, or should be. So if in fact that procedure, that process is happening ideally across the city by all the CROs, again, if in fact the CROs have gotten a priority from their assigned council or their assigned beat, then upon taking that through the CR process, they're required to report back at the completion of each step in real time. Then you've got a series of reports going out citywide that any of the neighborhood councils can access. That all should be accessible in some sort of a central database, separate, of course, from the SARANET, if in fact that's not possible. So the bottom line is that not only would the sponsoring neighborhood council have regular reports in specific areas, scan, analyze, respond, assess on their identified priorities, but also that information would be accessible by other neighborhood councils so they can follow these projects that may well mirror what's happening in their own beat and learn from them. Whether there's mistakes made or not, whether it was successful or not, whether it was a failure. Obviously, there's lessons to be learned from failures as well. The point is, I think it's important to have this kind of information on SARA projects, neighborhood council priorities, be accessible to all, not just neighborhood councils, but any block leaders, any residents, so that they learn from them. And I think that's the real value in pushing this kind of an approach. Mike.
Thank you, Jose. I'm reflecting back on what Paula said. If you're reporting on every step, that means that you're talking about ongoing operations. And I think that's precluded, period. I think that neighborhood councils should have access to all completed SARA projects so they can see what's been done in other neighborhoods, whether it's successful or not. As regards how well the SARA projects are going, it's my understanding that the commission just hired an inspector general, and that inspector general can be tasked with doing an audit of the SARA projects and reporting that back to the commission and to the public.
Mike, speak a little bit more if you would. I don't see any other hands up. Speak a little bit more if you would on the problem with having a CRO report on, for example, the scan of a priority assigned to him or her.
Oh, okay.
As
Well,
opposed
if
to
it's a SARA
waiting for the
project,
end.
that means he's identified a problem and he set out a strategy to address the problem, and then he begins to implement that strategy. Those are all different steps. The implementation, of course, is most important. If I'm a bad guy, then I'm going to go to all those meetings and find out what are they doing to target me, right?
Mhm.
Or if it's open to the public, then I'll just check whatever database that is to find out what progress they've made at coming at me. And then I'm gonna, destroy the evidence.
Okay. All right, that's something that I certainly have to think about. Thank you, Mike. Any other?
I can only,
hands up?
Reggie did make a comment. He said he understands, I assumed wrongly, that you were speaking of specific events. The ask is having access to the database in its entirety without a request. I do not believe any government databases are accessible to the public.
Okay.
And I agree.
Yeah, there's none that I can think of
Right.
that you can just walk up and say, like I'm an employee of DMV, let me go through NCIC,
Right.
that doesn't happen anywhere on any level. So, but there's a way around this for what I thought, Jose, you were driving at. It's just a matter of saying, instead of casting a broad fishing net, you specifically say, after the event, I'd like to know what happened at blah, 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 blah. And I'd like to know what happened on this date, this time, at this location. They have to provide that for you. And if it's sensitive stuff, they can redact it. And that happens on all government levels. So, and they have to, and that's the best we can get, but that's powerful information for, like Mariana was saying, for reviewing how to improve, what to do, etc., how to analyze. So I think we don't walk away empty-handed. We actually walk away with a great deal of information if we can be specific about our ask.
Yeah, thank you, Reggie. Just going back to what Mike said, I really appreciate that that comment, because my position has always been that the CRO, as I've said before, should take the neighborhood council priority through the SARA process and report back at the completion of each step in real time. But in fact, your point, I think, is well taken, and that is that if it's going to tip off the bad guys, then there has to be some modification of that. So those modifications is what I'm going to give some thought to. And I'm not sure what would be the best way of making sure that the target, let's say, doesn't get tipped off to what's going on in terms of what the CROs are doing to take this project through the SARA process. So that I appreciate that, because that gives me a lot to think about, because I'm not sure how, again, it can be modified.
I think it's impossible, because we've seen that in the history of, with the mafia, with various drug cartels, etc. They hire people to do just what you're talking about, and then in prosecutions, people can come up and they say, well, we're going to divulge who, your informant is, and they drop cases because of it. So this is has a long history, and law enforcement is well aware of it, and it defeats our purpose. Our purpose is to have community policing and to reduce crime, and not to make it easier for criminals to circumvent enforcement.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly give me a lot to think about, because I've held this vision for a long time, and I haven't really thought about that from that kind of an angle. But that doesn't say much for the my looking at it from all angles, but that's certainly something I have to certainly think about. So thanks, Reggie, and thanks, Mike. Shall we then leave this? Where are we at now?
11:20.
We skipped down a bit from this initial first part down to the SARA use auditing and reports. We're still going, I think, through the specific responsibilities of CROs. Want to make sure everyone has time to go through them and see or have comments.
Okay. So any we're at 11:20, just a time check. With everybody's permission, we'll go ahead and move on. Certainly given me a lot to think about. And if we're still in two, then we're going to, and Jesse, if I'm correct, we're going to the numbered duties under CROs are expected to. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yes. Okay. So going down 1 through 14, 1 through 14. And you put them in priority. Is that right, Jess?
not these. That was
Okay.
that was the previous set.
Okay.
I not yet put these in priority.
Okay. So the comments, starting with number 1. Is that good with everybody?
The word expected is highlighted there, Jose. I think you had said something to me about that, and that's why I highlighted it. Something about expectation versus requirements.
Yeah. Yeah, I would feel more comfortable with instead of expected, have required to, and just make it ironclad would be my preference.
Could we come back to that after we have went through all of these?
Sure.
Because I think we may find some expectations in here and then some things ought to be requirements.
So how is number 1 for now? Number 1, good. How about 2? 2, good. How about 3? Good. Now how about 4 then? Good. 5. Good. How about 6? That's good.
Sorry, can we go back to 5 for a second? So
Sure.
just recognizing our current the concerns about staffing, the number of CROs that we have, and what is the current spread. Researching and identifying 3 locations in a particular beat. There are a lot of beats that could be in locations in the hundreds. Do you want to keep it at that as an expectation? Do we want to keep, or is that going to be a requirement? That's a thought to think about.
Well, we could go ahead, Paula.
I was just gonna say, let's drop the 3. Research and identify the locations generating highest calls for service. I don't know why we would limit it to 3. Or, I mean, 3 is kind of historic, but yeah,
I would agree with that.
so just take out the word 3.
Yeah. Is that okay with everybody?
Mhm.
Because it could well be more, it could be less. Okay, so anything else on 5, Jesse? Okay.
Well,
Mariano.
Okay, go. Sorry.
Yeah,
Go
so these list of what were of expectations, these are current expectations, right? Because I'm hoping that if this policy and the CROs are effective, then they wouldn't be a necessity to identify violent crime hotspots anymore, right? And like 10 years, 5 years from now. So these are current expectations, right? To change later, right? Is that correct?
Well, I'm seeing it more that while these might be current expectations, they're part and parcel of the policy. We're actually going to, assuming that, we're all good with it at the end of our sessions, that this is going to be what we are going to present to the full commission.
No. Yes, no, I understand. I understand this is what we're going to be presenting as a policy. But once it gets implemented, hopefully it gets implemented, that, 5 years from now, if this policy is successful, then let's say, for instance, number 3, identify violent crime hotspots in their community policing beat is not necessary anymore because there are no more violent hotspots, right? So these may change as the policy gets implemented and is successful. That's all I'm trying to say.
Oh, well, certainly that would be my hope. That there's no violent crime hotspots in any beat. Gosh, if we could do that in 5 years, that would be, I think, miraculous. But certainly, yeah. The short answer, I think, yeah, we can certainly change it if in fact something's not relevant anymore. So yes,
We're in it to win it.
absolutely. So we went through 5, 6.
No. I have something for 5.
Okay, go ahead.
That after the paragraph appropriate, open up projects aimed at reducing these calls for service. I prefer if we said open up effective projects, because just opening up the project and leaving it at there, if it's ineffective or we're just wasting their time. I mean, we want to open up, or we want to create effective responses aimed at reducing these calls for service. It should be effective. It has to be. You don't stop working until it's effective. You can't just open up a project. Today we're gonna start looking at drug sales on a certain street, but you don't come but once a month. That's not effective. But according to the policy, you've satisfied the policy because we did open it up.
Well, Reg, I would hope that, and in fact, maybe that's a qualifier we need to put there.
Yes, that's what
open up an effective SARA project, because in fact, that's how I see that's the core that I see of the CRO's job, is to take neighborhood council priorities through the SARA
Exactly.
project. And that a neighborhood council priority is just another name for a SARA project, when in fact the CRO is taking it through that process.
Okay,
So-
use that language. Use Sarah.
Okay.
Let's put effective in there, because just the mere opening up a project or starting something is not a completion of the job. That's not completed staff work. Completed staff work is when it's aimed at reducing crime, but is it effective? I aimed at doing it. I wanted to reduce crime, but I opened it up. Now I'm on to something else. No, you got to stick with it, partner, till you get the job done.
I certainly agree with that.
Yeah.
Should we put effective in front of,
Yes, I would.
Brother
That's my
Sarah?
suggestion.
Open effective SARA projects.
Yes,
All right.
please. Yeah.
All
great,
right.
thank you.
And Jesse has his hand up.
Okay.
Jose.
Sorry, Jesse.
The only thing I would say about effective is that we are learning a lot in our current times about the root causes of crime that potentially may require innovative crime prevention strategies that are not necessarily proven or evidence-based, or could be in either way. And so having something that the qualifier effective has, I would think, may prevent a CRO or may dissuade a CRO from trying something very different than the standard policing projects, right? Maybe that's not an issue effective as much as it is about the target, which is reducing calls for service, but that's something that I have a thought about. But
Well,
I agree, they should keep at it, and they should do what they can to address whatever issue is coming up at these locations.
I like the word creative, open, effective, and creative SARA projects at reducing these calls for services. So So innovativeness is added to that.
How's there, that cool with everybody? Open, effective, and creative SARE projects?
Okay.
You had another comment, Jesse? Okay, on that, on your point, I would hope that the qualifier as appropriate, and now with the addition of creative, the CRO would be, would hopefully be encouraged to explore non-traditional.
Yeah, think out of the box. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Doesn't always need a SARA project, full-blown SARA project. You know, there may well be some other creative answers, particularly if the CRO really is trained to the point that they are informed about community assets that can be tapped to approach a community problem. There's going to be hopefully many, many instances where a CRO says, look, this is really something that this organization that's specializing in youth issues, or this organization specializing in homeless issues or whatever,
Macro.
has a specific expertise that I can tap to approach this issue and hopefully resolve it without needing a badge and a gun. So that's good. So everybody okay with 5 as it reads now, with the addition of effective and creative? Everybody okay with that? Then let's move on to 6. Shall we put the same language there? That is effective, creative, and creative SARA projects?
Sure.
Great. Thank you, Jesse. Is this language okay? If it's good, then we move on to 7. Okay, 7's good. Move on to 8. If 8 is good,
Yeah, I think this is one that's I'll say it like this. All I've read thus far have been expectations. This is a requirement. I want you, if you're going to be an SOR officer, communication is absolutely the priority. So that means you got to check your email and voicemail daily. You shall do that. You
Couldn't agree
can't
with
say, hey
that.
man, I don't check that email. I don't get to it every 2 or 3 days. No. And you call people back. You got to do that.
Yes, couldn't agree more. Could not agree more.
So that ought to be a requirement. I don't, however you want to wordsmith that, but shall, yeah, okay.
They would definitely will have to do it. Certainly agree. So with that addition, go ahead. I don't know who is.
Mariano, I was just gonna say that the wording of this is different than the others. And our lead in, so having shall there kind of throws it off. The lead in is that all CROs are expected to, and then when you get down, then you're reading are expected to shall check. So I think it would just be check if you're going to do anything. Delete the shall. And then we'll get back.
I guess what I was saying is that this number 8 is a higher requirement than
Yes.
an expectation.
I agree, and it probably should be, maybe it should be pulled out of
Okay.
this laundry list altogether and put someplace else.
Put under a section that says requirements.
Yeah, maybe so. So we have some expectations and we have some
Requirements.
requirements. And then how much of this are we setting, we are sort of setting job requirements, job duties. If a CRO does not check the emails daily, are they subject to discipline for not doing that?
I would say yes.
If I was his sergeant or lieutenant, yes, he would be on the carpet with me. You know, and I would find something within does meet, you know, some in the job qualifications does not meet qualifications, you know, or something that that's in their general orders that would allow me to first counsel, you know, bring to his attention, then counsel, and then maybe write a PIP or something,
Okay.
performance improvement plan. If this was a problem.
Yeah. So maybe we highlight all of 8 as one of the ones where it's a question as to whether this is going to be a requirement or an expectation. And then to the extent that we see others, it seems like the 1 through 7 could possibly be more expectations.
Yes.
8 is a requirement, and to the extent there are any others that appear to be requirements, perhaps we can highlight those too.
Okay.
The judge, your question about discipline raises the bigger question of termination. Are these at-will positions? And if the guy isn't doing if he isn't doing any of it, can he be relieved of his responsibility? If the neighborhood council thinks he's not doing his job or he's not responding, can he be relieved of this assignment and a new CRO take his place? That may be another section, but I think your question raises that issue of, you know, what happens when they don't do it? What happens if they're convicted of a crime? What happens if they're guilty of other misconduct? What happens if they use force on somebody?
Those are really good questions.
On duty and off duty.
Yeah.
What happens if they beat their
Yeah.
wife while off duty? You know, do we want them as a CRO officer? So maybe we ought to have a section,
Yeah.
in, you know, afterwards.
They lose their right. Yeah, they lose their right to carry a gun.
Yeah, I think it, go ahead, Mariano.
Yeah, all those, you know, misconduct issues are certainly important, but you know, not checking emails, I don't think that should be, you know, reason to fire someone, but it is reason to correct that issue, you know. So I think that the community should also have the input. NCPC should have the input in reviewing, you know, how CRO is functioning, you know, or completing their expectations. You know, if they're not checking the emails, that means that, you know, what are the emails coming from residents, from neighborhoods? You know, they're not checking the email, those emails, and something's going on. There's no communication. There's no, you know, interaction. Partnership is falling apart. So those kind of things, there ought to be, it should be, you know, how do we correct that? You know, what steps? And then, you know, if there's 3 or 4 instances where they're not doing it, then maybe we can talk about, you know, either moving on from that CRO. Thank you.
Jesse.
So I think the part about misconduct and specifically criminal convictions, either off duty is addressed in a different policy about just the qualifications of officers. I think that the part about taking, I think perhaps a more closely tied question to what the work we're doing on is, how do we get a CRO out who's not rising up to the level of the job? We have the section with that's a little bit higher up about transfers in and out under personnel assignments, which does talk about deselection or transferring out of a particular assignment. I also started work on a section later on that we have not yet gotten to, excuse my very fast scrolling, which is right here, the evaluation section.
Yeah.
Something to look at perhaps in between the weeks. Questions such as, how do we evaluate CROs? What metrics? Number of meetings, number of projects, results, number of neighborhood councils, specifically feedback from community members or neighborhood councils. Their impact on crime, if that's their meeting reports, something to think about as we're working through these specific responsibilities.
Yeah.
But don't let me
That's
get
excellent,
ahead of
Jesse.
ourselves. It's just a start, but
Yeah.
we're getting there.
Yeah, and not only just how do you evaluate it, how is that included in their performance evaluation? That, you know, that it is important, not just the NC's evaluation, but the officer's performance evaluation for their record.
Yeah, that's a really important element.
Yeah,
Not
all
only-
all of this comes under the purview of whoever these who they are reporting to, who are their supervisors. But you got to give them the elements to stand on what you're doing, and one of them as critical is communication. Now, you're not going to fire nobody for not responding to emails, but you surely are going to come, or ought to come, to the attention of their supervisor if they don't respond to emails. Why don't you? You know, and then what are you going to do about it? How can we improve this? And if the problem persists, you're not talking to the people you need to talk to. So you're in the wrong place. You need to be transferred out. And if there's some egregious acts like domestic violence, off duty or something like that, or being on a take. Let's say you have a drug hotspot. We find out that this guy, the rumor is, this guy is getting paid, working for this group or whatever. And you have an expectation of that. You don't have the evidence yet. Do you keep them there or do you move them? If you're a good supervisor, you say, we got a problem. We assume something here is not right. So you know what? You need to try something else.
Yeah, Jesse.
I'm gonna time check us here because it's 11:42.
That was going to be my comment too.
All right, thank you, and thank you, Reggie. I think that speaks to what Jesse has scrolled down to in terms of evaluation of the CROs. I think the neighbor.
But you got to put this in here. What is to be evaluated?
Yeah, so that whole question, I think, is really an important one for a lot of the reasons that Reggie just mentioned. But certainly, the neighbor councils have to understand, I think, that they can and should have a real role in evaluating their not just their CROs, but separately the NSCs. But certainly, we're talking about CROs right now.
Oh yeah,
they should definitely have a strong role in that. So anyhow, let's go ahead, and we're at 8. We're going to 9. If 8's okay, we're going to definitely take a look at pulling into a separate section as Jesse's put in there. So if we're good with 8 for now, let's look at 9.
I say highlight 9 is like 8. That's not an expectation. That's a requirement.
Sorry to jump in, but the reason why I was time checking is because we're slated for an hour and a half, and I don't want anyone to feel pressured to stay longer than they have committed to.
Okay.
Mariano.
All right. Hopefully everybody's okay with going to noon at least. Mariano.
Okay, yeah, I have something to say about 9, but as far as the time, I thought the email or the invite had 2 hours till 12. So that's why I'm not feeling uncomfortable at all, because I was already prepared. But
Yeah.
okay, 9, I think it's important to highlight informal community leader and identify them, because how many neighborhood influencers do we know, or informal mayors, right, of the block or the
Exactly.
neighborhood? And a lot of times we overlook these leaders, because we look for, the school principals, the community center staff, all those kind of things. So we really need to highlight informal and
Yes.
make sure that we don't overlook those really important community leaders, simply because they don't have a title. But certainly, if we go out to, see Bobby or Juanito on the street, he can certainly have a whole lot of influence, and because he's an informal leader. So that's my only point. Let's make sure that CROs know that, and they have a little pocketbook with those names on there. Go to people. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really important point. And it speaks to the idea of having block leaders be identified and then hooked up in a network, and then hooked up to their local neighborhood council. I would suggest that we just simply, after EG, put block leaders, comma, and neighborhood watch block captains, which is more of a formal designation. So are we good with 9? That's another section or another point that we may well make a requirement in a separate section. So if 9's okay.
Jose,
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's probably covered in et cetera, but I think it's important to specifically identify merchant associations. Because they can help you with the night out. They can supply the food, give you coffee and donuts, and they also have their own interests. Particularly with all the shoplifting going on.
Yep. No, you're absolutely right. That's a really good point. Great, good point. Any other comments on 9?
Yeah, business. Merchant. You want association or people in business? I want folks in business.
Both, and
yeah.
So we're talking like chambers of commerce, etc. So will that work, Reg?
Yeah, because I see merchants association as like chambers of commerce, but
Okay.
the person's out there who owns the store, he'll tell you who's stealing stuff on the street because he's there every day, and his business is going up or down because of it.
Yeah, and all these connections we need to make. I agree. We good with 9?
Yes.
Okay. Let's move on then to 10.
I think that's a requirement too.
So any additions or this? The only addition I would make would be city, county, state, and federal. Let's not leave out the federal government. So I would just add I would eliminate and after county, put a comma, and then after state, put and federal agencies. Just cover all the grounds.
And I don't see park and recreation in there, and it probably should be.
Would that be a city? Would park and recreation be under a city agency? Or is that a separate?
Yeah, it is a city agency. That's what you meant by it. Okay. All right.
Okay. Mariano.
Yeah, under fire, we could put macro, only because it's under fire. But, to Creighton's earlier point, about establishing some relation with the new macro program.
Okay.
This is where I wanted to see park and recreation.
Okay.
This list does not automatically generate, so I have some formatting challenges. So I'm going to start down here. No disrespect, I'll reorder later.
Okay.
Not do the and or. My personal pet peeve is that and or really doesn't. So let's do and. So you'll coordinate with all of them.
Yeah.
As I think it's.
Okay. All right, that's good. Any other modifications to this section?
I ask, I think Mariano, you had this comment about specifically the All City Youth Council. I couldn't quite find that.
That's the council for the OUSD. It's a student-led, I think they're juniors and seniors.
Got it. Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. Anything else on this, what is it, 10? Anything else we want to add or delete? If not, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, 11, okay?
Mhm.
You know, I always think of the fact that, and I've not seen anything that confirms it, but I've heard many times that we have over 2,000 nonprofits in Oakland. So gosh, what a huge resource that would be if we in fact learn what their expertises are and how that can be tapped to deal with neighborhood issues. So 11, okay?
Mhm.
Okay, on to 12. 12, okay. 13. 13, okay. Well, that's a big one. I'd love to see that on a regular
That's
basis.
got to be, that's a shall in that, so.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a mandatory one
Yeah.
too. So we should highlight that as possibly mandatory.
Great.
I'm sorry, Jose.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was trying to think real quickly about number 11. Do you just expect them to coordinate with community-based organization, or you're required to do that?
I would say, in fact, I would say this whole from 1 to 14 or 15, whatever it is now, just be all of it required. But certainly this would be important because I think, again, if in fact the CROs and NSCs are really doing their jobs, they're going to know what resources exist in the community.
Exactly. I think I would feel comfortable if we ought to think about this whole section after I think number 8 as being requirements.
Let's put a requirement or a shall in front of this one. Thank you, Jesse. That one too, Reggie.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want anybody thinking he's got to work on his own and think everything up on his own. You need to go talk to other people. That's what you were
Exactly.
talking about the community that's just south of you or below you, you know, in the Melrose or whatever. You need to be working with them too.
Absolutely. Yeah, we got so many people working in silos, including I would think CROs that need to, you know, understand that they can tap other people that have specific expertise, whatever it might be, or youth or education or whatever. But they need to know that those resources exist and how they can tap them to make things better in any sort of way. So, but they got to make that effort to inform themselves. So where are we at now? We're on 14.
Mariano had his hand up.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mariano.
Yeah, you know, that with the community-based organizations and nonprofits, that's going to require a lot of work by the CROs, which I don't, you know, they should be doing, but they have to do a lot of research on, you know, what services that these nonprofits provide. You know, if it's, I know that there's got to be at least a third of those 2,000 that you mentioned, Jose, you know, that provide immigrant services, citizenship classes, youth services, and formerly incarcerated. So, you know, these all kind of lead to, you know, what kind of view what type of view do they have of law enforcement? So the CRO needs to do quite a bit of investigation and research on, you know, what kind of services are provided, what's their best way to interact and partner with these nonprofits, where it's a friendly, this all leads to, again, establishing trust and transparency, with this policy. So, it's more than just simply coordinating with them. They need to do some research on them. Thank you.
Thanks, Mariano. Jesse?
Do you think that, or a question to the group, I guess, should it be the CRO who's doing the investigating or the research, or should the NSC, who's probably a larger fixture in this whole scheme with that base of institutional knowledge, should be able to provide that or educate the CRO for and say, okay, you go use this resource?
Yeah, I would like to answer that with a resounding yes, absolutely. And the example I would give is that in the taking of a priority through the SARE project, through the SARE process, while the scan may well be done by the CRO, the analysis of what I feel is the research that has to be done around resources in the community that could potentially impact the development of the third step, the response. That should not be done by the CRO by and large. I think that's definitely should be done by the NSC, maybe some select people of the neighborhood council or other interested individuals. But that kind of research that can be very time intensive should not be done by a badge and a gun. Their time is too valuable out in the street. So I would suggest that that's an example of where other resources, other people should be doing this kind of research and then providing that to the CRO for their taking it, reading it, and then utilizing it in a way they think is best in terms of developing that third step of the response. So long way of saying, yeah, I think it should be, I don't think the CRO should be doing this.
Mariano's hand is up.
Yeah, good question, Commissioner Shea. I don't even think it should be the NSC or the council. I think it should maybe be those identified community leaders, especially those informal leaders. Because let's be real. Even the councils are seen as they work in conjunction with the police. Whether that's true or not. So maybe those community identified leaders, especially the informal leaders, should do this kind of investigation and research into partnering with the community-based organizations.
Could I then make a suggestion as to how we implement this through policy, which is instead of having the CRO coordinating with community-based organizations, perhaps the CRO should be coordinating with the neighborhood service coordinators and those community leaders to utilize community-based organizations to resolve problems?
That would, yeah, I think that would be a more complete approach. Because in fact, that's to Mariano's point. I think that in fact that would be really a much more community acceptable approach to deal with these problems. Is that language okay with everybody? Coordinate with NSCs and community leaders to utilize community-based organizations to resolve problems?
I'm going to grammar check myself here.
Okay. Again, the community-based organizations in Oakland are just so extensive. What a huge resource that I'd love to see that gets tapped for dealing with a lot of these issues. And again, talking about and connecting this kind of research being done by community leaders or block leaders. Where the community leaders and block leaders are far more cognizant and able to do this kind of research around root causes of crime. It's one thing to address crime, through OPD, CRO, enforcement, etc. But in fact, I would hope the community policing also encourages community leaders of any kind to work on what is necessary to attack the root causes of crime, which of course are racism and poverty, lack of opportunity, et cetera, which is not something that necessarily OPD is going to be doing or can do. But certainly community leaders and community folks can and should do it, particularly if we have a whole range of community organizations that are already dealing with this to some capacity. So, again, the focus, I would hope, would be on really attacking the root causes of crime and really eliminating crime from that kind of a basis, not dealing with the symptoms. Anyhow, so we good with 12. I'm sorry, with 11 and 12. And is 12 good? And 13. And now on to 14.
Can I just go back to language? I was on 13, which one says create, gather, or provide updates. Why are we giving them options? Why don't we just say provide updates? Does it really matter?
Oh, because of the use.
Can we take out create and gather, or and then just say provide updates, results, and events? What is that? What are we saying? Provide updates, results, and events regarding projects or priorities. Responses and results NSCs for posting.
Yeah, I think just putting provide just makes it clear.
Yeah,
Obviously, if
just
you're gonna
delete.
provide it, you got to create it.
And then what are we saying just in terms of what the responsibility is? So we got provide updates, results, and events regarding projects or priorities, commas, responses, comma, and results
A little
to the
redundant.
NSCs. Okay, I'm sorry.
I think results is redundant twice.
Okay. So and responses to NSCs for posting to social. Yeah, I agree. So we just do and responses.
Projects.
Thank you, Jess. So is that reading now?
Okay. Yeah, for public dissemination, it's much better. Jesse.
Recognizing the large amount of people who don't use social media to get their
Yes,
news.
yes,
No. you're
yes,
absolutely right.
indeed, absolutely. I still don't have a Facebook page.
Well,
Or an
Facebook,
Instagram account.
you may be ahead of the curve because Facebook is losing people. Anyhow,
You know, that's true.
how does
Jose,
yes, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mike.
It's the same issue from earlier with regard to providing updates of projects. And the same issue pops up in 14 about divulging information that could alert targets, to something that's coming their way. So I would just be cautious in what that language means.
So we should put a qualifier there, maybe as appropriate.
I don't know what you could with regard to providing, you can't provide updates to ongoing actions, right? Or particularly an update that indicates what the future action is going to be.
Mhm.
We're finished with step 2 of the Sarah thing. I think that's what that anticipated, and I think that that's something you can't do.
Okay. So how's that look, at least for now, this qualifier to the extent possible, given your point, does that work?
Yeah, that
Okay.
it does.
Okay.
That's a good addendum.
Okay. So 12 look okay with everybody?
Yeah, And I know we want to push through, Jose, but it is after 12. We lost Creighton a while ago, and now we've lost Paula.
12:04. Okay. So we want to stop here. And we've got a few things that I think we need to think about. One of them is the question of the chilling effect, if in fact the CROs are going to be involved in any enforcement actions. That's one. The other is the separate sections for expectations versus requirements. Anything I missed? Those are two I've got circled that we're going to think about. Certainly, I'm going to think about this question that Mike brought up about how, if at all, you can have reports, as I was saying, reports from the CRO on priorities at the completion of each step in real time, given Mike's comments. So that's something I'm going to definitely think about. So anything else I missed that we should consider?
You didn't miss. I would ask that we all consider two things. One is how we address making sure that this is a robust program, despite the ebbs and flows of staffing challenges, whether and what the solution via policy might be. And two, perhaps the evaluation criteria as we're coming up to it.
Right. Yeah. Let me just editorialize real quickly before we all take off. And as always, thank you so much for you guys taking the time on a Saturday. And that is that my position right now is that OPD's got things asked backwards in terms of community policing and in terms specifically of their reduction in the CROs. It seems to me that if you have CROs actually doing their jobs, then you're beginning to build those kind of relationships that then build trust. And if they're in fact collaborating on neighborhood council priorities identified by the folks, then you've got the collaboration that begins to build those relationships and build that trust. And that process, to me, will result in the kinds of coordination, or I should say information from the community to the CROs and OPD to actually be effective in terms of the solving and the deterring of issues. And that, to me, goes from murder all the way down. So it seems to me that instead of cutting CROs, they should be increasing CROs. So that's one of the things that I have an issue with. And in fact, we may well consider to have invite the chief to come in and to talk about how was that decision arrived at, who made the decision and why. And if in fact anybody here in this group agrees with me, then we may well tell them, look, you've got this backwards. You should be increasing CROs and what they do and strengthening what it is that they do, as opposed to taking that away, because that's exactly the opposite of what you should be doing. So I'll leave it at that. Mariano and then Mike.
Don't sugarcoat it, Jose. First you said half-ass backwards. Now you're just saying ass backwards. Okay, so sorry about that. If I could ask Jesse, if he could please send out those two requests that he said, to specifically look at how to address making sure that this is a robust policy, and then the second one about staffing, as well as the points that Jose brought up that we are to look at for next conversation. This will sort of help at least me sort of focus, my input for 2 weeks from now. And then lastly, are we going to officially extend 2 hours? Because I'm okay with it, but I just need to plan for it.
Previously, we were an hour and a half when we met
Yeah.
from 2 to 3:30. And then I think the 10 o'clock meetings have been from 10 to 11:30, so.
Okay.
Is there anybody got a problem with going 2 hours, or do we want to go with an hour and a half?
People who might have had a problem with 2 hours have already left.
Okay.
So,
So we just schedule 2 hours and whoever can make it, can make it.
There you go.
I know
Give it-
Rudy has.
give it a
hard
track,
stop
yeah.
At 11 o'clock.
Yeah,
That's why he's here.
I'm gonna put, I don't want to lose people like Paula and Creighton, who always have really good things to add to our discussion. I would suggest we stay with hour and a half, we start on time,
Okay.
and we end on time. But I
How's
think
that
that, that might be more fair if we can hope to get some people back,
Okay.
hoping.
So we go,
But I don't know.
we go with an hour and a half then? Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
I would
Alrighty.
suggest that.
Okay.
Judge, are you willing to rule on asked and answered objections?
Yes, I got it. We're gonna keep pushing forward. We won't go back to to prior sections maybe. But yeah, we move forward.
All right, and Jess, you'll put out that list of things that that we need to think about. Great.
Yeah, Jose, I want to say this before we go. What you said about the chief of police and taking away community policing is the crux of if they believe in it or not.
I agree.
See,
Absolutely.
they giving lip service. They've been trained, FBI Academy, you know, California Police Officer Association, state, all in the same dynamic. That every problem is a nail and you got to have a hammer. And the hammer is what? More police officers, more police. Nothing creative. There's no difference than 1975 in policing than what we're doing right now. Really, no dramatic difference. This request is the difference.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Macro is the difference. And they fight that because, hey, that's how we were trained. That's how we do it.
Yeah. And I
Thank
think
you.
we
Thank
have
you,
to.
Mr. Miles.
We need to stress to the chief that there needs to be an OPD representative at each one of these meetings. And if it's not going to be Fevel, then let Bolton come. Because what I've already seen is some after the fact criticism of the direction in which we're headed, instead of having people at the table. Bolton seems to be critical of what we want to do with community policing. So let Fevel or Bolton be here at each one of these meetings to show their commitment to establishing a good community policing policy in Oakland.
I totally agree, Commissioner Harvin Forte, because you know, even at the last meeting when DeVries and Fable reported that, you know, maybe we shouldn't be, you know, shooting for the moon with all these aspirational goals, you know, that because, you know, staffing and all this, that to me was already a sign of a weak buy-in. And in the beginning, we stressed that, you know, OPD's participation in this ad hoc was that they would be our, you know, buy-in advocates, our liaison to the OPD to really buy in this policy. And then they're starting to kind of policy nickel and dime us, you know, with, you know, well, we can't shoot for the stars and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So then it's starting now. And so I agree, they need to be here and, you know, and I mean, I got to be honest, in the beginning, I was a little not welcoming of their participation, but now I see how critical it is. You know, we need their participation, their input, because it tells us, you know, 2 weeks ago, it told me a whole lot about, you know, what Reggie said. You know, do they believe in this? You know, do they really have buy-in? So at least it's going to tell us that. So I think we should really push and stress that there should always be a rep. Thank you.
They're in their group. In the police culture, if you talk like you gentlemen and lady have been talking, you are, I won't use the word enemy, but you're odd to them. And so we have to understand that. But on the same token, trying to appease them is an impossibility. Nothing will appease them except for you be quiet, shut up, let us do our job, and let's go back to the status quo. That's what we're dealing with. If you want to stay innovative and creative, even if I can use the word revolutionary, you just have to press ahead. When we get to the next level, they're going to knock it down. Maybe we get 30% of this in. That would be a major progress.
Mhm. And I think maybe we raised this during the chief's report at our commission meeting. And maybe Jesse too, maybe contact the chief. Maybe Regina should ask him to report on community policing to reassure us that they are committed, but also to just get a commitment that you're going to send someone, right, lieutenant or deputy chief or someone, or higher to each meeting. They're every other Saturday. So you got to commit to having somebody here with authority, and so we can get, because I just see us getting to the end of this, and then they're saying, well, we missed the last 10 meetings, and so we object to this, we object to that, it's not going to work. It's like, no, you come to the table and you tell
your
us
evidence of commitment is your presence.
Yes, absolutely.
And the chief ought to be saying, you shall be there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Lyles, for everything you just said, because you hit it right on the head. You know, and again, to me, the reduction in CROs indicates clearly the lack of commitment to community policing, because they should be doing it the other way around. Half-ass backwards or ass backwards, whatever it is, they need to be having that kind of commitment objectively, and that is putting more emphasis and more CROs in place.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
and even bass backwards.
Yeah.
Bass backwards.
So just a real quick note. I got a birdie telling me that Bolton's going to be gone in 6 months, and
really?
but he's still going to, from what I understand, he's still going to be connected with or doing something with OPD. What that is so far, I don't know. But
is this the attorney? Is this the general, the inspector general?
No,
this is one of the deputy chiefs.
Deputy Chief Bolton.
Yeah,
the one who is telling us basically that this stuff is a pipe dream.
Yeah.
And that we can't, we're not going to be able to do the things that
So is getting a chief job somewhere?
Sorry,
I don't have that kind of detail, but I just understand that he's going to be gone in 6 months, but he's still going to be operating in some sort of capacity within OPD. What that's going to be, I don't know yet. But that was a rumor I heard the other day.
He's the one who's the liaison to CPAB and SSOC, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting twist. But anyhow, I could talk all day on this stuff.
What is SSOC?
Mariano, go ahead.
SSOC, what does that stand for?
That's a Measure Z oversight committee, or they call it the Safety and Services Oversight Commission.
Okay.
As Paula Hawthorne heads that group, right?
Yeah, she's part of that group. Now, and talking about that, thanks to Jesse Shea for putting together a great slideshow for the presentation of what we're doing to the SSOC.
I think very good, very good.
Thanks for doing that.
That Jesse Shea's pretty capable, isn't he?
He's a pretty sharp dude. Yeah.
Yeah. And the SSOC basically reviewed the prior policy, right, Jose?
Yeah.
Reviewed it and then kind of sent it on to us. So
so
we're working from their last iteration of the policy.
Yeah. That's why it's so good we have Paula here, because she's connected with that as well as SSOC currently. Well,
Yeah.
I won't extend this any longer. Again, thank you so much, Mike and Reggie and Mariano, Paula and Creighton. And give our best to Pastor Jackie and ask her, whenever she's able to join us.
Yes, yes.
I'll put another call into Wilson. I don't know what's up with him, but I'd certainly like him back.
Yeah.
In any case, unless there's any
What-
announcements or
What happened to Bob Jackson?
We don't know.
he came to one meeting and that was it. I have no idea there was no feedback as to why he hadn't come back. So
Well, that speaks loudly.
Oh, he did send an email that
He did,
took
okay.
on, he took on a little bit too much and had a lot of things going on specifically with his church that made him need to step away. So he did. He was
Oh,
very
okay, great. Well,
responsive about
okay.
that. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you
Okay.
did that.
And
Kathy.
the
Lynn,
other pastor, what's his name, Jenkins, he
Mm.
shows up every
Could
now and then.
I can I stop the recording?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, I'm stopping.